You are standing in the fitting room and you have just pulled on a brand new pair of jeans that caught your eye on the rack. You turn slowly to the mirror, and honestly, they look pretty good. The waistband sits where it should, nothing is pulling anywhere uncomfortable, and for a moment you actually think you might have finally found the pair. So you decide to test them a little further before you commit to buying anything today, and you sit down on the small bench in the corner of the fitting room just to be sure. That is when everything changes all at once, without any warning at all. The front of the waistband presses directly into your stomach. The button digs in as one sharp, uncomfortable point you honestly can't ignore. And when you glance behind you in the mirror, the back of the waistband has pulled away from your body, gapping open in a way it never once did while you were simply standing still. You stand back up, and the whole waistband has already shifted out of place, rolled slightly downward, and now sits noticeably differently than it did just a few minutes earlier. If that has ever happened to you, and if you are watching this video right now, it very likely genuinely has, please hear this clearly before we go any further together. Your body is not the mistake here, and it never truly was, not for one single moment of it. A waistband simply cannot be honestly judged from one single standing pose in front of a mirror, and yet that is exactly how most of us were quietly taught to judge it every single time we go shopping for something as ordinary as a pair of jeans. Today, this particular video is specifically for plus-size women over 60 who have a fuller stomach or midsection and are genuinely tired of jeans that look perfectly fine standing still, only to fall apart the moment real life actually begins. We are going through 6 exact, practical waistband details worth checking carefully before you ever buy, covering exactly where the waistband lands on your body, how it is shaped around you, how the fabric behaves over real time, how wide and firm it actually is, and what happens specifically at the button or the zipper once you sit down. This is not a promise that any single pair will flatten your stomach, make you look thinner, or remove every last bit of discomfort completely and forever, no matter what. That would not be honest, and you genuinely deserve better than an empty promise like that from a video such as this one. And the very last thing we cover today, the one that ties every other detail together into something genuinely useful, is a simple, realistic test you can run right there in the fitting room itself, one that finally lets you know exactly what a pair of jeans will genuinely do before you ever hand over your hard-earned money for them. Let's start right now with the very first important detail, the one that begins in the exact moment the waistband first lands somewhere specific on your stomach, before you have even had a real chance to sit down or move at all. Number 6, the rise placement check. Picture this. The waistband lands directly across the fullest part of your stomach, right at the point where you least want any pressure at all. And here is what almost nobody tells you. That happened even though the tag on those jeans said high rise, a word that is supposed to mean the waistband sits comfortably above the trickiest area entirely. Labels like high rise, mid rise, and low rise do not actually guarantee where a waistband will land on your particular body. They describe where the fabric sits relative to a generic pattern, not relative to you, your proportions, or where your own fullness happens to sit. Not every high rise lands high on every body, and that single sentence explains more fitting room disappointment than almost anything else in this entire video. Think of it this way instead. A waistband can land above the fullest part of your stomach, directly across it, or below it, and each of those creates a genuinely different experience. Landing above it tends to avoid direct pressure entirely. Landing directly across it is usually where the real discomfort begins. Landing below it can work well for some women and feel unsupported for others. We are not going to tell you that high-rise jeans always work better, because that simply is not true for every single body. What matters is where the waistband actually rests on you, specifically, not what the label promises. Here is what to actually check, step by step. Standing naturally, without adjusting anything, notice exactly where the waistband sits relative to your stomach. Sit down slowly and see whether that landing point shifts higher or lower once you are fully seated. Walk a few steps and notice whether it stays put. Lean forward slightly and watch what happens right at that landing point. Check the side view too, since a rise that looks fine from the front can land differently from the side. Then stand back up and compare. If you carry more fullness higher on your stomach, a rise that lands above that point often helps, giving that area room instead of pressure. If your fullness sits lower, a rise landing below it may serve you better than a taller one ever could. A shorter torso can mean a high rise crowds you faster than you might expect, while a longer torso usually allows more room to work with before anything feels tight or restrictive. This is only about where the waistband lands on your particular body. Next, we look at its actual shape, which is a completely different question. Number 5. The Contoured Waistband Check. Now think about the actual shape of the waistband itself, not just where it lands, but how it curves or doesn't around your body. A straight waistband is cut the same width the entire way around, as if every body were a perfect cylinder. Most bodies simply are not built that way, and a fuller midsection often makes that mismatch even more obvious. A straight waistband tends to press at the front, where your body curves outward the most, while standing away from your back, where the same straight line no longer matches your shape. It can feel uneven at the sides too, tighter in one spot and looser in another, all from the same single piece of fabric. A curved or contoured waistband is cut differently on purpose, following the body's actual shape instead of assuming one uniform circle. This can mean more even pressure all the way around, though it genuinely does not work identically for every woman, and it would not be honest to promise that it does. Here is a simple, practical test you can do right in the fitting room, no special tools needed. Run your hands slowly and deliberately around the entire waistband while you are wearing the jeans. Notice exactly where it presses firmly against you. Notice where it stands away from your body instead, leaving a visible gap. Notice any spot where it folds over on itself or where it gaps open even slightly more than the rest. Ask yourself honestly whether that pressure feels roughly even all the way around or concentrated uncomfortably in just one or two specific places. Do this standing first, then sitting comfortably. Then check the side view carefully, and finally check the back view specifically, since that is often where a straight waistband reveals itself the most clearly and honestly. This is not the full seated movement test we will cover later. Right now, we are only asking one focused question. Does the actual shape of this waistband follow your body, or does it assume a shape your body simply does not have? If you carry more fullness higher on your stomach, a front curve concentrated specifically there tends to matter the most. If your fullness sits lower instead, a curve positioned lower on the front usually helps considerably more than a higher one would. Understanding shape on its own is not enough, though, because even a beautifully shaped waistband can still fail if the fabric itself behaves badly over time, loosening, sliding, or losing its structure after just a few hours of ordinary wear, which is exactly what we are covering next, in real detail. Number 4, the Stretch and Recovery Check. Here is something that trips up more women than almost anything else on this entire list. Jeans can feel completely comfortable the moment you first put them on, and still become loose, saggy, or oddly shaped after just a few hours of actually wearing them through a normal day. That is because stretch and recovery are two entirely different things, even though we tend to talk about them as if they were exactly the same. Stretch simply means the fabric extends when you move, sit, or bend forward. Recovery means something else entirely. It means the fabric actually returns close to its original shape afterward, instead of staying stretched out and loose. A waistband can genuinely have plenty of stretch and still have poor recovery, and that particular combination is exactly what leaves you feeling fine in the fitting room and disappointed by dinner time that same evening. Think carefully about everything this actually affects in real daily life. Immediate comfort the moment you first put the jeans on. Whether the waistband loosens noticeably after you have been sitting somewhere for a while, whether it slides down after you have been walking around, whether it rolls over on itself uncomfortably, whether the stretch becomes permanent, meaning it simply never bounces back at all, no matter how long you wait, and whether repeated sitting and standing throughout an ordinary day gradually wears down that recovery even further as the hours pass by. Here is a simple, practical way to get a sense of this before you buy anything. Gently stretch a small section of the waistband fabric with your hands, just enough to see how it genuinely responds, never hard enough to risk damaging the store's merchandise in any way. Then let go completely and watch closely what happens next. Does it spring back toward its original shape fairly quickly and confidently, or does it stay stretched out, looking slightly loose and tired even a few seconds later, refusing to fully recover? This matters quite a bit because the highest stretch percentage printed on a tag is not automatically the best choice for you personally. A very stretchy waistband might feel wonderful for the first 10 minutes and then become genuinely loose within a couple of hours, sliding and rolling as the day goes on. A more rigid, structured waistband might hold its shape well but create more pressure than you actually want to deal with. Neither extreme is automatically correct. This section is entirely about how the fabric behaves over real time through real, ordinary movement. Not about how wide or structurally firm the waistband is, which is a completely separate question we are covering next in real practical detail. Number 3, the Waistband Width-and-Firmness Check. A narrow, firm waistband can dig sharply into your skin like a thin, unforgiving line, concentrating its pressure into one small strip instead of spreading it out anywhere at all. That is the specific problem we are addressing in this section, and it has nothing to do with rise, shape, or how the fabric recovers over time. This is purely about width and structural firmness, and how those two things work together, or against you. A very wide waistband can feel restrictive in its own way, especially when you bend or sit, simply because there is more fabric fighting your movement at once. A waistband that is too soft can roll over on itself or collapse entirely, losing any real support it might have offered. A waistband that is too rigid can create a hard, unyielding pressure band exactly where you need some give. None of these extremes is automatically correct, and supportive is genuinely not the same thing as tight, even though we sometimes use those words as if they mean the same thing. Here is a simple, practical check you can do in the fitting room. Gently press one finger against different points around the waistband while you are wearing the jeans. Notice whether that pressure feels even as you move your finger around, or whether it feels sharply concentrated in specific spots. Notice whether the fabric feels genuinely supportive underneath your finger, or whether it instead feels sharp, thin, or already starting to collapse against your skin. Do this while sitting, and again while leaning forward slightly, since both of those movements change how width and firmness actually behave on your body. Walk a few steps afterward, and notice whether a wider waistband restricts your natural movement at the waist more than you expected it to. If you have a shorter torso, a very wide waistband can feel more restrictive than it would on someone with more length to work with, simply because there is less vertical space available. A longer torso usually has more room to comfortably accommodate a wider band without anything feeling crowded or tight. If you carry more fullness higher on your stomach, a softer, moderately wide waistband often distributes that specific pressure more comfortably and evenly than a narrow, rigid one ever genuinely could. We are not telling you that one single universal width is correct for absolutely everyone, because that would genuinely not be true for every single body shape and size out there. Even the right width and firmness combination will not save you if the button or zipper itself becomes its own separate, isolated pressure point, sitting right in the middle of an otherwise comfortable waistband, and that is exactly what we are addressing next, in careful, practical detail. Number 2, the front closure pressure check. Here is a genuine realization that surprises a lot of women. The entire waistband can genuinely feel fine, comfortable, even well-fitted overall, except for one single painful point right at the center front, exactly where the button or zipper sits. That specific spot genuinely deserves its own dedicated attention, separate from everything else we have already covered so far, because it behaves quite differently from the rest of the waistband. The button, the zipper tape, the fly facing, and several layers of fabric all stack up together right at that one point, creating something firmer and far less flexible than the fabric surrounding it. Focus specifically on a few things here: button placement and button size, zipper construction and how thick the fly actually is, whether the closure uses hook and bar hardware instead of a traditional button, and whether multiple layers of fabric are stacked directly on top of each other right at that center point, creating unexpected bulk exactly where you sit and bend the most throughout an ordinary day. Some jeans hide a small elastic panel behind the button specifically to relieve this exact pressure point without changing how the jeans look from the outside. That can genuinely help, though it would not be honest to promise that it eliminates every bit of pressure completely for every single woman who tries it. Here is how to actually test this. Stand normally first and notice how the closure feels in that relaxed position. Sit down and pay close attention specifically to that one point, not the waistband as a whole. Lean forward slightly, the way you might reaching for something on a low shelf or tying a shoe. Reach for something on purpose, testing the closure under that particular kind of movement. Then stand back up and notice whether that same point still feels the same as it did before you sat down. This helps you tell the difference between two very different problems. General tightness across the entire waistband is one issue, and it usually feels similar everywhere you check. One isolated, sharp pressure point specifically at the button or zipper is a different issue entirely, and it often shows up clearly only once you sit down and lean forward, not while you are simply standing still in front of a mirror. We are not turning this into a lesson on how zippers are constructed, and we are certainly not making any medical or pain treatment claims here. This is simply about noticing where discomfort concentrates on your own body in this particular pair so you can make an informed decision before you buy. Once you genuinely understand all 5 of these individual details on their own, the real remaining question becomes whether they actually hold up together all at once under real ordinary movement, which is exactly what the final and most important check of all reveals clearly. Number 1. The back gap and seated fit test. Here is the truth this entire video has been building toward. A pair of jeans has not genuinely passed the fitting room test until its waistband has been tested through real, ordinary movement, not just a single standing pose in front of a mirror. Jeans can look completely correct while you are standing there, and they can still gap open at the back the moment you sit down. They can dig sharply at the front once you are seated for more than a minute or two. They can roll over on themselves after just a few minutes of ordinary wear. They can slide down noticeably after you walk across a room. They can shift entirely out of position the moment you stand back up. And they can genuinely feel like a completely different pair of jeans after normal movement than they did in that very first standing moment. So here is a simple 8-step test you can actually run yourself, right there in the fitting room, before you ever spend a single dollar. Step 1. Stand naturally, without pulling the waistband into position or adjusting anything at all. Step 2. Check the front pressure exactly as it is in that natural standing position. Step 3. Check whether there is an excessive gap at the back, more than just a little room. Step 4. Sit down and stay seated for at least 1 full minute, not just a few seconds. Step 5. Lean forward slightly, the way you might reaching for a bag or leaning toward a table. Step 6. Stand back up without adjusting the jeans in any way at all. Step 7. Walk several steps, enough to let the fabric actually move with you. Step 8. Check whether the waistband moved, rolled, slid, tightened, or opened up at the back compared to where it started. None of this needs to feel complicated or exhausting. It takes just a few extra minutes in a fitting room you were already standing in anyway. As you go through it, notice front pressure, back gapping, whether the sides stayed aligned, any rolling, any sliding, how it felt after sitting, and how it felt after walking. Notice honestly whether you find yourself wanting to reach down and adjust the waistband back into place. 1 or 2 fingers fitting comfortably into the back gap is simply different from an entire hand fitting in there with room to spare, though there is no single universal measurement that is automatically correct for every woman's body. If you find yourself constantly adjusting a waistband throughout this short test, that is genuinely useful information gathered honestly before you buy, not after you have already worn them home and realized the truth too late. This test will not guarantee perfect comfort forever, and no honest video can genuinely promise that to you. What it will give you is something far more valuable than a guarantee. You will no longer have to guess from a standing mirror image and hope for the best. You can actually test what a pair of jeans will genuinely do right there in the store before you ever hand over your money for them. Conclusion. So if jeans have ever looked perfectly fine in a mirror and then quietly let you down within the first hour of actually wearing them, please hear this clearly and completely. Your body was never the mistake in any of this, not for one single moment. A standing mirror check alone was never truly enough to judge a waistband honestly, no matter how carefully or how long you looked at yourself. Labels like high-rise or stretch fabric do not guarantee comfort on their own. Real comfort comes from testing the waistband while sitting, walking, and leaning forward, not just standing still for a moment in a fitting room. Keep only the pair that works for your own body and your own daily movement, and let go of anything that doesn't, without a second thought. I'd genuinely love to know, honestly, in the comments below, which waistband problem frustrates you the most: digging, rolling, sliding, back gapping, button pressure, or sitting discomfort. And if this video helped you today, please consider subscribing for more practical guidance.